Welcome to 5 Minutes in the Word, a daily devotional in the Word of God. All right, Logan, anytime you're going into a bad situation, you always want to have someone really strong with you. If you're going out and to go swimming somewhere, you want a real strong swimmer.
Yep.
If you're getting out on the water and in the boat, you want somebody that kind of knows their
what they're
way,
doing.
know their ways around. And if you're getting into some sort of a fight, or where you need somebody strong and you want someone on your side that can hold their own.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of our spiritual life, the person we want on our side through everything is God.
Absolutely.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about Psalm 35?
And everything that you described to this point is an excellent lead into this. And of course, this is one of the imprecatory psalms that David is writing. And verses 1 through 8 kind of gives forth this idea that David understands that there is a divine solution to this problem that he's going through. Starting in verse 1, contend, O Lord, for those who contend with me, fight against those who fight against me. Really, verse 1 kind of lays it out for the remaining verses, 1 through 8, that is, in saying that David is more or less saying, I need you, God. I need you to come fight for me.
Right.
Continuing on in verse 2, take hold of your shield and buckler and rise for my help. Draw the spear and javelin against my pursuers. Say to my soul, I am your salvation. Here at the end of verse 3, David saying, remind me that you can save me, and only you can save me.
Right.
Verse 4, let them be put to shame and dishonor who seek after my life. Let them be turned back and disappointed, who devise evil against me. I imagine David saying, it's like only the Lord can crush them. I know my great-grandfather, I never got to meet him, but one story in particular that I heard from him was there was a wasp nest on the front porch, and his hands, because he worked in the sawmill, his hands were super rough, and
Right.
Obviously he didn't have any feeling in his hands because he would go up to that wasp nest and crush it in his hand. Just a very rough man, I guess you could say. But I imagine that as what the Lord will do to those who, or David is describing here as what the Lord will do to these people. Jumping down to verse 9 now, David is saying, he's more or less giving a prayer for deliverance. Verses 9 and 10, then my soul will rejoice in the Lord, exulting in his salvation. All my bones shall say, O Lord, who is like you, delivering the poor from him who is too strong for him, the poor and needy from him who robs him. This is more or less a promise if the prayers are answered. David is saying, I will do these things. And David here transitions in verses 11 through 16 to describing the kind of people that he's dealing with.
Right.
In verse 11, he kind of goes talking about how he treated these people as friends. If you could summarize 16 through 11, it would be like, my friends are against me. Starting in verse 11, malicious witnesses rise up. They ask me of things I do not know. They repay my evil for good. My soul is bereaved. But when I was sick, when they were sick, I wore sackcloth. I afflicted myself with fasting. I prayed with head bowed on my chest. I went about as though I grieved for my friend or my brother. As one who laments his mother, I bowed down in mourning. Really, perhaps David is dealing with some two-faced people who are making these accusations. They were probably not necessarily friends that he would, I guess in the modern terms, go hang out with all the time, but he knew them enough to be worried about them and pray for them. And he did all of that. As you see in verse 13, I wore sackcloth, I afflicted myself with fasting, I prayed with a head bowed on my chest. He was obviously worried about these people. Right. But in verse 15, kind of get the illusion that they stabbed him in the back. And we've all been victims of that, but here in this point, David is crying out to God for help with that. Verses 17 and 18 kind of go back to David saying, God, I need you, come to my aid. Verses 19 through the rest of the chapter is kind of really the turning point. Starting verse 19, let not those rejoice over me who are wrongfully my foes, and let not those wink the eye who hate me without cause. So now David is saying, God, don't let them, they obviously acknowledge what they're doing, because they're kind of like, if you You and I are on an inside joke on somebody else. We might wink at each other and say, "Hey, watch this," kind of thing.
Yeah.
David is saying, God, don't let them do that. Don't let them have an inside joke. Don't let them do anything to me. Verse 20, for they do not seek peace, or speak peace, but against those who are quiet in the land, they devise words of deceit. They open their mouths wide against me and say, aha, aha, your eyes have seen it. So I really like to compare this with Jesus, because David is being wrongfully condemned, and he's pleading with God to come for aid in triumphing, or helping them triumph over this wrongful condemnation. In verse 22, David wants God to fulfill his promises. Verse 22, you have seen, O Lord, do not be silent. O Lord, do not be far from me. Fulfill your promise that you're always going to be there for me.
Right.
Not necessarily prove it to me, but remind me that this is what you always do. Now 23 through the rest of the chapter. Awake and rouse yourself for my vindication, for my cause, my God and my Lord. Vindicate me, O Lord, my God, according to your righteousness, and let them not rejoice over me. Let them not say in their hearts, your heart's desire. Let them not say, we have swallowed him up. Let them be put to shame and disappointed altogether, and rejoice at my calamity. Let them be clothed in shame and dishonor, who magnify themselves against me. Let those who delight in my righteousness shout for joy and be glad, and say evermore, great is the Lord, who delights in the welfare of his servant. Then my tongue shall tell of your righteousness, and I've got markings that I can't read, and of your
praise all the
praise,
day
yes. Sign of a well-used Bible. But
right.
Anyway, going back to verse 23, David understands everything must line up with God's judgment. Because he expressly says, according to your righteousness. If it's a part of God's plan to rescue David from this, David's like, okay, let's get to move on. That's verse 24. Skipping down to verse 26, kind of goes back or touches back on the imprecatory part of this psalm, in that David is praying for a decisive victory for righteousness, and let them be clothed in the same things that they're trying to clothe David in. And then finally, 27 and 28, it's a solution over which everyone can rejoice in, is that the Lord always reigns.
Absolutely. And so, we look at this, and we know we've all faced moments like this where we felt like, the world was fighting against us, but the Lord's he's gonna seek out his vengeance, on the unjust and on the unrighteous. Our job is to remain righteous before him, and we will receive that reward that he has so greatly promised to us.